Hey.
Hello. I am just making sure that I'm sharing my screen correctly. Using all the new tools today.
Yeah.
All
Oh,
of
I
them.
know. I'm so sorry. We were like, "Hey, can you use these 12 new things?" And you were like, "Yes."
Everyone did a really good job of rolling with it because everyone got on and we were like, great, we're going to walk you through a quick and easy 28-step program to get captioning set up.
Yes, there's
For
the new
those
captioning tool. I'm using Canva for the first time, which has been a great
Oh my
experience so
God.
far. I don't know about the speaker notes yet, but I have them pulled up kind of. I had to bring an extra monitor on. I was moderately prepared. I feel like I could have done better, but we'll wing it. It's Twitch. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Great.
Oh no, not
I
at
was going to
all.
say, if half the time when I log on to do a stream, if I'm moderately prepared, that means I'm leaps and bounds ahead of usual.
Mhm. Yep.
Agree.
And for those of you who don't know, Kathryn has a Dev by Design show every Monday. And then right after we do a UI Mondays show. And I kind of got this inspiration, Kathryn, from Martine and chat saying, so this is how you CSS, where I feel like we should just tackle some problems that maybe you and I learned a long time ago and take for
Yeah.
granted. Yeah, maybe it could be fun
I
from
like
lower
calling
level.
it "This is how you CSS." I think we should do a
Yeah.
series
No, I
called
know we're gonna steal
"How
that. Who
You
was that in
CSS."
chat? Yeah, we got to give him credit. Oh well, without further ado, I think Ashlee, if you're ready, I can add your slides to the screen.
Yeah, let's try it.
Potentially.
I think I got everything set up right this time. Perfect.
That looks
There's no
great.
extra window tabs. It looks great.
Perfect.
I
Really
Awesome.
hope
does.
having my window on top of this. I kind of feel like I don't know.
I'm.
I
I don't know
forgot.
how. We need to talk after because it looks great. Like you got rid of the bits.
Thank you. We can do that.
Yeah.
Oh, so what are we talking about today, Ashley? Kick it off for us. Tell us what we're doing.
All right. So, interestingly, we talked a lot about options earlier during the panel. And this ties right into it. Like, how do I name these things in my application? So we're going to be talking about user preferences versus user settings and the importance of inclusive language. And just to preface this super fast, I'm using all new tools today. So if I get distracted by something popping up on my screen or whatever, just bear with me. I would appreciate it. So, like right now, I don't know how to go to
No worries.
Yeah.
Thanks for the follow, 420 Koala. We appreciate you. Mwah.
the next slide. And also at the bottom left of every slide is my handle that I use on any place that I'm on. So I'm on Twitch and Twitter and Dev2. I write on there sometimes. But anywhere that you're looking for me, if I'm there, that's the handle. If I'm not there, I'm not there. All right. So to introduce myself for anyone that wasn't here earlier, I'm Ashlee. I'm a disabled web developer with a focus on web accessibility. I read and craft during my downtime, and I strive to live a peaceful and adventurous life with my partner and two pit bulls. And as I said earlier, if you see any blobs walk around behind me, it's my dogs. They're very cute, but we got to keep them blurred out to keep things focused. So today I'm super excited to talk to you about a topic I've spent countless months thinking about, and that is, what do I call the things that users can customize in my application? This is the question that we're going to try to answer. I'm trying to take a very systematic approach to this. I try to solve a lot of engineering problems this way. You can't always just make something up and go with it because you don't know if it's going to be effective. The best approach that I've learned so far in my experience is, let's figure out what the problem is, let's answer questions, and that's how we can solve problems. So when you search user preferences versus user settings on Google, this Stack Overflow question is what comes up first. This question was asked 12 years ago, which, by the way, was a long time ago, in like if I can do math, 2010. So I was like in high school
I was
when
about
this
to say, I
question
don't
was
want to
asked.
think about what I was doing 10 years ago.
I was
That's
in high school. um, and it has 43,000 views on it, which is a lot, meaning this question has come up a lot and Google presenting it first also means something. People are asking this a lot. It's an important question. It's a common question. And the poster says there are several words with similar, in some sense, meaning: options, settings, properties, configuration, preferences. They go on to say that English is not their native language, and they ask if the answer can be explained in simple English, and they provide a template for answers, which is really nice. And they're asking for an answer in a way that they understand. So if anyone's ever wondering about how to ask questions, this is a great question formatted. It's not just like, help, I don't know what to do. They are actually asking for answers in a certain way, which is really nice. And they also ask for best practices. And then the top answer, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I wanted to point out a couple parts. And first, they admit that this is a tricky issue, and they say there's no single consistent style followed by all applications. As you say, they are broadly synonyms. I agree with this. This isn't a clear-cut answer, and the reason we have so many options, or choices, I'm going to say choices instead of options, since that's one of the words here, and I don't want to get confusing. We have so many choices with this, and people keep coming back to this question. So that obviously makes it tricky. The part about these words being synonyms, options, settings, properties, configuration, preferences, to repeat those, is mostly true until you consider the impact of those words over their intent. And that brings me to my disagreement of what, sorry, I had to scroll, of what the writer of this answer says next. In truth, it doesn't really matter so long as your expected audience understands what you mean. This is the part that I disagree with, and I disagree with it on the basis of impact versus intent. As users of applications, we can fully understand the meaning of language and still not feel respected or supported by it. So before we try to solve this problem that we have, and I'm showing the question again on the screen, it is, what do I call the things that users can customize in my application? Let's make sure we talk about why we can't just choose a term at random or pick the one we think is good because everyone else uses it. So why does inclusive language matter? Excuse me. Inclusive language prevents the erasure of the experiences of people with valid and valuable identities. Language that isn't inclusive closes the conversation to hearing about marginalized experiences, and we can't really build anything successfully for people without acknowledging those experiences. Inclusive language is not isolating and does not reinforce biases, stereotypes, and stigmas. Exclusive language, on the other hand, is othering, and so much of it is based on untrue stereotypes and baseless stigmas. So that reinforces these things in our mind, like subconscious biases and things like that. And then being mindful of inclusive language is one way to expand your perspective and practice reducing bias thinking. And before I move on to the next slide, I want to make it clear that these are not the only one and true ways to do any of these things. Reducing your bias thinking is such a large practice, and it has to be a very consistent thing that you actively do. These are not all of the ways to do it. This is just things that I'm highlighting that are specific to this talk. So there are many, many, many approaches and reasons why inclusive language matters. Now that we understand one of our primary goals behind answering this question, which is to make sure we use inclusive language, let's think about the 5 words we saw in the Stack Overflow question and use the process of elimination to narrow down the list. So our 5 options are choices. Our 5 choices are options, settings, properties, configuration, and preferences. I hypothesize that settings is the most used out of this list, so I definitely want to keep it in the mix. Properties and configuration are more complex words, like they have a lot of syllables. They can be difficult to pronounce. I have a lot of pronunciation issues. I think that's like some speech things with being deaf and having hearing loss my whole life. And they would likely have a cognitive learning curve for users because they're not as commonly used. And they're a little bit more technical, so people with a less technical background might not be as familiar with them. So we're going to take these two out. This leaves us with preferences and options, aside from settings, since we're keeping that one. And options could be a viable choice against settings, but it still feels like a more technical word. And for the sake of a simpler decision, we'll rule it out so we have just two choices left. Besides, my main goal of this talk is to convince you of why you should not use preferences. So now we're left with two options, choices. I keep messing that up. We're left with two choices, preferences or settings. Now,
But honestly, it does kind of reinforce how easy it is to fall into like our own language patterns and our own habits, because it's
yes,
the way we talk is so ingrained, and it can be easy to just like, I say this, so of course I'll put this in my application. Doesn't always
yes.
mean it's the most thoughtful choice. So
Mhm.
in a way, it actually is kind of reinforcing your own point.
I hope it also reinforces that, like, this is a practice. You're not going to get it right the first time. I'm literally telling you, advising you. I don't really want to tell you what to do. I'm advising you based on my slides in this whole thing that I've come up with. And I'm still messing it up, and it's okay. You know, you just correct yourself and you move on. And if you, just to add here, this isn't part of the talk. If you do say something that's actively harmful, like right now, I'm just trying to use clearer language so it's less confusing. But if you do accidentally say something harmful, do a quick apology and move on, because if you like harp on it and dwell on something and say, I'm so sorry, and like you express all of this emotion, you are putting that burden on the person that you have already harmed. So you are adding more to their harm, and they don't need that. Like, you need to manage your own emotions after, you know, this situation has passed, and you need to reflect on it. So whenever you do mess up, just be mindful of that, of like, am I managing my emotions, or am I accidentally putting it on someone else to manage and making me feel better about messing up? So that's just a aside. But now that we have two options, I just did it again. Now that we have two choices left, preferences or settings, this has become a matter of breaking down each of these words. So we're going to start with preferences. So I looked up prefer and preferences on thesaurus.com, and it shows synonyms. And I personally really like looking at synonyms to help me see if there's a word that I already understand to help me define it, because oftentimes if you go to dictionary.com, it has like a very cyclical definition, and it's like more words that I don't understand. So I tend to just look at synonyms. Plus, I've spent a lot of time writing literary analysis papers in college. I hope you can't hear that car that just drove by. Anyways, it was distracting for me. Um, so I've spent a lot of time with the sources, with writing and trying to come up with interesting words when I write literary analyses. So to start, let's look at prefer. And I'm not going to read all of these because I don't feel like they're all super relevant to what we're looking at here. But the ones that stand out to me are adopt, choose, pick, select, wish, desire, be partial to, would rather. And so let's look at the other version of this word, which is preference. And again, this is another screenshot from thesaurus.com. And the synonyms that stand out to me are choice, desire, option, alternative, cup of tea, and I guess maybe that last one stands out because I'm becoming a huge tea drinker in the past several weeks. So maybe that's not super relevant to the talk, but I am becoming a big tea nerd, so it stood out. Anyways, when you think about all of these synonyms that I read off on this slide and the slide before, do you get the sense that preferences are important or that they're nice to haves? Preferences implies that there's a true and correct default that should be adhered to. It gives a reason to underprioritize problems reported in this area of our application, like users reporting bugs and things like that, because we subconsciously don't see them as important. I've too often heard people speak negatively of users coming up with workarounds and applications to the degree that people refuse to even provide technical support if someone does something wrong, because you're not doing it the way that I wrote the app to do it. So you must be doing it wrong, which isn't necessarily true. If users start doing things in your app that you never expected, it's a sign. Maybe there's a bug, maybe you don't understand your users as much as you thought you did, and maybe it's a hint that you need a new feature, not future, to make it easier for someone to do what they're trying to do. But regardless of what it is, any opportunity to better understand your users should be approached with excitement. Because congratulations, there are people engaging with something that you've built. It means they care about it, especially if they're giving feedback. They just want it to be better, and they want to help you improve it by giving their opinions. So that should be something you're excited about. And moving on to the next point, preferences are analogous to conveniences, things that are helpful but optional. And the sooner everyone realizes that applications can't just be made of shiny features for marketing the application, the better, because accommodations cannot be implied as optional or conveniences. They are always necessities. To provide an example, in the physical offline world, ramps and elevators are not just preferences for people who cannot walk upstairs. They are necessary because if you cannot physically go to an upper level, you cannot go to wherever this place is that you wanted to go to. A lack of accommodations is a barrier, irregardless of whether or not someone has figured out a workaround for the barrier. Because if you didn't already know, disabled people are very resourceful. We face barriers to access so often, like daily, depending on how much we go out, which with the pandemic and everything, a lot of people aren't going out as much, but we still face them online, like paying bills and anything like that. We often find a way around these barriers because otherwise we can't do what we need to do. And workarounds are time consuming and exhausting, and time and energy are resources disabled people can't afford to spend as often as non disabled people. I share this with you from personal experience. So, back to the two choices that we have here. We've looked at preferences. So, now let's go ahead and take a look at the word settings. Settings is a neutral term and one that people are already very familiar with. I would guess that for many people, settings is the word they look for first when they're setting up a new phone, computer, or online account. I know it's personally the first word that I look for. Inclusive language is affirming, and it makes people feel welcomed and valued. I know when I see affirming language, that makes me feel welcome and valued as a disabled person. I see it whenever I'm in a place that is very clearly, using language that's inclusive, or, they're working extra hard to make sure that there are captions and different things like that. That's all affirming. And it's like, okay, cool. I want to be here. So sometimes, like in this case, in this specific question that we're trying to answer, using inclusive language isn't about learning extra words to expand your vocabulary. Sometimes it's just about not using certain language and favoring neutral language that you already know. So while you might not get applause or kudos from your users about using neutral language, like using settings over preferences specifically, you can have confidence that the language you've chosen won't push people away. And to be frank, doing things like this isn't about getting recognition for it. It's about taking a little extra care to treat people with kindness and prevent harm wherever you can. And that's all that I have for my slides. I think we can do questions now. And I also have on the slide a link to my Twitter account and also a link to my website where I write. That's where I spend most of my time these days. And I'm so grateful for the time and energy you decided to share with me today.
I really loved that. And there was such a cute conversation happening in the chat around the cups of tea. I don't know if you saw that because I know you were really focused on your presentation. But when you had mentioned that you liked cups of tea, there were a bunch of chats that were like, cups of tea better than preferences. Where's the dark mode? In the cup of tea menu. Like, I'm calling it cups of tea in my apps now. And then someone asks, is cups of coffee allowed? Which
that could also be allowed.
But I just thought that was so charming, and I love the idea of the cup of tea menu. Like,
Well, on that, if you go to my website on the mobile version or like just a narrow version, I use an actual hamburger icon for the hamburger menu.
I love
that
that.
is so cute.
And these slides are branded with my new colors on my recently updated website. So if you
How
go
did
there,
you
you
how
will
did
see
you
a
pick
dark blue
them?
background.
Did you have like a theme inspo from somewhere? How'd you pick your new colors?
I think it's called coolers.co.
Oh yeah,
And it's
I've
just a
used
theme
them.
tool. And I think I slowly, one by one, picked a color that I like. And then I paired them all together. And I wanted to make sure I only had a few colors. And like this peach kind of color that's in the foreground text and that light green, those are always my text colors. And then the other colors, which is dark blue and dark red and dark green, those are backgrounds. But currently, I only use the dark blue in my background. Yeah, I think that's the link that you got there.
I like what every time I read it, I just read colors, but like obviously it's pronounced differently. They just okay. I just thought I should share my specialness with them.
Same.
That's always the problem with having to pronounce things that you just write. Like that was us earlier. It's like, do you just say accessibility, or do you say ally, or is it like A11y? Like, which I argue it's just writing. You wouldn't pronounce it for anything else.
Or do you just be really weird like me and be like A11y and you're like, are you a robot? A11y.
Very important, similar question. I've heard a lot of those kind of questions about how to pronounce the W. I know I'm like biasing it by saying it, the WCAG, which is how I always see it, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, because someone said it to be like WCAG the other day, and I almost died.
that was me. Also, please chat. Tell us how you say it.
Was it you
because
that
I
said
don't know,
WCAG? I genuinely didn't remember.
It was. I like pronounced it. I was like WCAG, and they were like, and I was like, oh gosh.
It sounds like you got a hairball.
Someone quickly, hang on. It's this one. WCA. That one. That's what I'm saying with my mouth right there.
I say.
I would love to know.
WCAG.
How do you say it?
You say
WCAG? You sound like a WCAG team.
I mean, I think everybody says it differently.
The dubcag.
Dubcag. You know what I did, or guess what I didn't do? I forgot to click to start captions.
Oh no!
Oh,
bummer!
Oh no! I know. Well, for those of you who didn't know, we've been trying for a couple weeks now to find a closed captioning system setup that would work well, because we are not using OBS, we're using StreamYard, so we don't have all of the basic plugs that OBS gives you, and so our poor streamer guests today, we were like, so we're going to need you to sign in here, download this thing, click these 3 buttons, and make sure you don't click them here. You got to click them here. It was a mess. So thank you for hanging in there
balance
with us.
on your left foot. It was.
Is this going to be shared, like on YouTube or something later?
Yes. Yeah. No. And we so we have our YouTube account, and then I can also ping you with the video. I think the video of the day kind of thing will also be on Twitch after. So on both places, but yes.
Cool.
Well,
so at the very least,
Ashlee.
there will be captions with that.
Yes. Yeah, and I know we're about to switch over. I just wanted to highlight this one comment that I thought was nice. Settings being something that you set and unset depending on whatever situation that you're in, which could be long-term or could be temporary, whereas preferences are something more like long-standing, personalized. For example, your Wi-Fi on and off is a setting, which you might change regularly. Dark theme is a preference, which you would less often do, which an interesting approach.
Can I elaborate on my answer to that?
Please. Yes.
Okay.
That's why we brought you on.
Cool. I'm glad I'm in the right place then. So dark mode is a preference for many people. But for some people, it's not a preference. And we did talk about this a little bit earlier in the panel. I also need dark mode in most cases because I have sensitivity to light. It's a really big trigger for migraines for me. And text sometimes just doesn't look right. Like when it's extremely high contrast for me, like things get a little blurry and don't really look correctly. So I feel like what's important to take away from this is that just because something is a preference for you, it might not be a preference for someone else. And that's why preference isn't necessarily an accurate term, because it's not a preference for everyone. And I brought this up in the panel also, like the prefers reduced motion. I don't like the name for all of the reasons that I have outlined here today. But that's something that I set and unset all the time. And it's for an accessibility reason. Sometimes motion makes me sick and nauseous, and a lot of times it doesn't. So I don't always turn it off. Yeah.
I am so sorry.
No, you're okay. That really wrapped up my answer before I started rambling too much.
No, not at all. I use red mode now. Is that a thing? Wait, like, is there light mode, dark mode, red mode? I need to know if that's a real thing or if he's trolling.
I mean, there are definitely modes you can go in to, like the color contrast stuff and select specific. You can really drill down and choose some of that stuff. And especially there are days when I am so sensitive that I have Flux downloaded on my computer and I will turn Flux on, and then I will go into the Apple settings and turn night shift on top of that. And I have seen some versions of, like, they'll call it dark room mode. I don't know if that's a thing anymore, being that, like, dark rooms, who's in a dark room with the computer anymore? But in that mode, it is genuinely almost no light at all. And it is red emitting light. So there's no blue light, in that if you did have your computer in the dark room, you wouldn't expose a photograph.
Oh,
but
that's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, the chat was saying that there are other colored modes as well. So
yes,
that's really cool.
Yeah. And me getting hyper, slamming my own hand into the mic en route to my keyboard.
Well, Ashlee, do you have any other things you'd like to plug? Any other shout outs before we pass the baton to Carie?
I guess the only thing that's super duper relevant is I have a post called "What the Heck is Web A11y?" So if people want a little bit of background on what that is, it's called a numeronym, and this post gets all the way into it and why certain pronunciations are easier and all of that good stuff. So that felt super relevant. But the only thing I have to plug is my blog.
No, that's perfect. And Kathryn just dug up the URL, so there it is. Check it out. Thank you so much.
Yay, that really was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I was pulling it up too.
The chat agrees.
Chat giving you a shout out. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, if y'all ever want to chat on Twitter or something like that, I am totally up for that. I'm open to questions there if you think of something later. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Ashlee.
Bye.
Oh, so for our next guest, I'm so excited. I'm so very excited. We have the lovely Carie Fisher, who, if you were here in the beginning, and don't worry, if you missed it, there will be a recording. We did a roundtable with all of our speakers today, asking them some accessibility questions. We are going to welcome to the stage Carie.
Hey.